They said the house had always been there, but no one remembered who built it. Some swore it changed shape with the seasons. Others claimed it only shifted when the moon turned away. If you stand close enough, you can feel it breathing through the walls, as if something inside it is waiting for you to notice. The village of Itakurubi slept under a curtain of wet heat that year. 1953 had brought no wind, only a dull humidity that stuck to the skin and coated every sound in syrup. Crickets hummed in irrhythmic bursts, dogs panted in silence, and the air smelled of rain that refused to fall. On the outskirts, beyond a stretch of red clay road, stood the house. Small, single story, made of wood, so aged it looked gray even under daylight. Its roof leaned inward, heavy with dust. It had been abandoned, or so people said. Yet each dawn, something in it changed. Sometimes it was a window that hadn't been there before. Sometimes a door that faced the wrong direction. And once, they said, the house had grown taller overnight. A new floor, complete with shutters that vanished by the next sunset. No one lived there, but someone had. You could tell by the smell. Faint soap, iron nails, a trace of tobacco that never faded. The house held onto scent like it held onto heat, releasing it slowly, as if reluctant to forget. That night, the rain finally came. It began without warning, a fine mist at first, then sheets of water that made the air hiss. In the storm, the house seemed to shrink and expand with each flash of lightning, its edges bending, its roofline quivering. The next morning, a group of children went to see if it had survived. What they found made the entire village fall silent. The house was standing, yes, but it wasn't the same one. The walls were pale, freshly painted, the doorframe straight and new. Curtains hung behind the windows, and smoke rose from the chimney, as if someone inside had just lit a stove. Yet the ground around it was untouched, the mud still holding the deep footprints of the night before. No one had passed. No one could have. By noon, word had spread. The priest came first, then the schoolteacher, then the mayor. They circled the house, whispering prayers and measurements. Every detail was different. The porch, the shape of the roof, even the scent in the air. It smelled now of coffee and pine, not dust and rain. They knocked. No one answered. The windows reflected only the clouds, and the chimney stopped smoking the moment the priest crossed himself. That evening, the villagers gathered at the edge of the clearing. The house looked ordinary under the fading light, peaceful even. But as dusk deepened, its shadow began to stretch in the wrong direction. Not toward the forest, but toward them. Inside, something moved. The sound was small, like a chair being dragged across the floor. Then another, softer, the slow closing of a door. No one went closer, not that night. But in every home, the people lay awake, listening through the thick, wet air. And each one swore that sometime before dawn, they heard a single knock echo from the woods. Not on their doors, but inside their walls. By the second day, curiosity outweighed fear. The air had cooled slightly after the rain, but the ground still steamed under the morning light, releasing that red, metallic smell that stuck to the tongue. Children gathered at the edge of the clearing again, throwing pebbles toward the porch as if trying to prove it was solid. Each pebble struck wood with a sound that didn't echo, just a short, dull thud, swallowed by the humidity. When the adults arrived, the house looked exactly as it had the day before. Yet something subtle had shifted again. The curtains were drawn now, tightly, though the night before they had been open. The priest, Father Lucero, crossed himself before stepping closer. He pressed his palm to the front door. Warm, not from sunlight, from within. He circled the house twice, muttering prayers. The ground was soft, but there were no footprints, no wheel tracks, no sign of intrusion. Even the weeds along the foundation had grown an inch overnight, curling toward the wooden walls like fingers reaching for warmth. He called out, voice low and hoarse. "Hey, Algianahi!" Silence answered him, but behind it, faint and rhythmic, came another sound. Not footsteps, not voices. Breathing, the kind that fills empty rooms, slow and patient, drawn through floorboards like wind through reeds. When he told the villagers, they accused him of hearing the wind. Yet that night, the teacher, Rosa Duarte, heard it too. She lived 2 fields away, and still, through the weight of the air, Through the hiss of crickets, she heard something, wood expanding, a sigh within it, almost human. The next morning, the door was open. No one saw it happen. No one dared to enter. But from where the villagers stood, they could see the interior dimly. A table, 2 chairs, and a mirror hung on the far wall. In the reflection, the room looked larger, deeper, as though it stretched further than the house itself allowed. By afternoon, the mirror had vanished. They began to notice smaller things then. The porch step, which had cracked years ago, was whole again. The roof tiles were cleaner, aligned perfectly. Even the air smelled different, fresher, cooler, like rain trapped in stone. When night came, the house seemed to hum faintly, a resonance just beyond hearing, carried by the moist air. That was when the dreams began. People spoke of them quietly, ashamed to share details. Each dream began the same way, standing before the house at dawn, fog around their knees, hearing their own names whispered from within. No faces, no voices, only the sound of themselves being called, gently, insistently, until they woke with their hands reaching for a door that wasn't there. On the 3rd morning, the house changed again. It wasn't just new curtains or straightened boards this time. It had shifted location, not far, only a few meters deeper into the clearing, but enough to leave a perfect outline of dry earth where it had been. The grass beneath it was pale and flattened, as if pressed for years, though it had only stood there 2 nights. The villagers argued. Some said it was the storm's wind. Others swore it was witchcraft, or memory itself moving. But the old woman who sold herbs near the well shook her head and said quietly, "A house that forgets itself must borrow the memory of those who see it." That night, no one slept near a mirror. When the fog thickened before dawn, it carried a new sound. A faint creak followed by the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps pacing inside wooden walls. Only one man, the carpenter Luis Peña, dared to step closer. He wanted to understand how the structure held itself together. He stood at the threshold, touched the doorframe, and whispered, "Who fixes you?" The house answered by breathing in. The lantern flame in his hand bent inward. He left it burning on the porch and ran. By sunrise, both the man and the lantern were gone. The only thing left was the faint smell of pine and oil drifting from within the house. By the 3rd night, no one went near the clearing. Even the animals avoided it. The goats that grazed by the road crossed to the other side, and the dogs that used to bark toward the trees now hid beneath beds, whining low in their throats. The villagers said the air there had changed. It shimmered differently, bending heat that wasn't there, twisting light in slow circular movements, as if the world had forgotten where to settle. Father Lucero left a crucifix nailed to a stake at the edge of the path, hoping to keep people away. By morning, it had turned backward, facing the forest. Beneath it, pressed into the mud, were 2 faint impressions. Bare feet, small and perfectly still. They pointed toward the house. No one had seen Luis Peña since he left his lantern on the porch. The villagers waited 3 days before deciding to look for him. When they did, they found the lantern still burning, a steady blue flame that refused to die. The wood of the porch beneath it was cold, unscorched. Rosa Duarte and 2 men from the mill dared to cross the clearing. The grass around the house had grown taller, thicker, heavy with dew that shimmered silver under the morning light. Each step they took left no mark. And when they reached the door, they saw their own reflections in the glass. But only briefly, before the images began to move a half-second behind them. Slower, delayed. They stepped back. The delay caught up. For an instant, the 3 reflections stood still, watching themselves walk away. That was when they noticed it. The windows had changed shape again, narrower now, stretched vertically like eyes squinting against the sun. And where the old boards had warped from rain, they now seemed swollen from within, pulsing faintly as if filled with breath. Rosa placed her hand against the wall. It was warm again. Under her palm, she could feel the slow expansion and contraction of wood. Not flexing, not creaking, but inhaling. She pulled her hand back and saw condensation where her skin had touched. The moisture was clear, almost sweet-smelling, like resin. When they told the others, the village split in 2. Half wanted to burn the house, the other half to leave it alone. Something that changes itself, the mayor said. might change those who touch it. The rain returned that evening. It fell heavier than before, slanting under wind that didn't seem to come from any direction. Through the downpour, people swore they could see movement inside the house. Faint silhouettes walking behind the windows, pausing, turning, and vanishing when lightning flashed. Some said they saw more than 3 figures. Some said fewer. The following morning, the shape of the house had altered again. The roofline had folded inward, creating an upper level that hadn't existed before. A small balcony jutted out where there had been none, its railing perfectly carved, unstained by rain. Below it, a single door had appeared, smaller, arched, and sealed shut. Father Lucero approached at sunrise, his Bible wrapped in cloth to keep it dry. As he neared, he heard something faint coming from inside. Not voices, not footsteps, but the soft shuffle of fabric, like bedsheets being adjusted in an empty room. The smell of pine had grown stronger, mixed now with something older, soil, and the faint tang of metal. He touched the new door. The wood was smooth, impossibly so, without seams or nails. He knocked once. The sound that came back wasn't an echo. It was a reply. The same knock, slower, heavier, from deeper inside. He stumbled backward. The door didn't open, but for a moment, the air inside shifted, a wave of humidity pressing outward, as if the house had sighed in its sleep. The next day, the villagers found footprints again, dozens this time, circling the house in a perfect ring, pressed deep into the mud. All barefoot, all facing inward. That night, the fog returned to the valley. It didn't roll or drift. It gathered, as if drawn by gravity toward the house. The villagers watched from their windows as it swallowed the clearing whole, dense and white, until even the outline of the roof disappeared. And when morning came, there was nothing there at all. The clearing was empty, the grass flattened, the earth dry, the air heavy with the smell of new wood. The house was gone. The house returned 3 days later. No one saw it reappear. It was simply there again, standing at the center of the clearing as if it had never vanished. But this time, it wasn't where the earth remembered it. It had shifted, angled differently toward the sun, its windows now facing west instead of south. The villagers noticed before dawn, when the mist lifted and sunlight struck a reflection where there hadn't been one the night before. From afar, the structure looked taller. Its roof no longer slanted gently. It curved upward, almost symmetrical now, like 2 hands pressed together in prayer. The wood had darkened to a deep, wet brown, the color of bark after rain. No dust, no cobwebs, only a sheen of moisture that glimmered when light touched it, as if it had been breathing underwater. When they approached, the ground around it was cold. The air smelled clean, too clean, stripped of life, like metal after a spark. Even insects avoided it. Their hums broke off mid-flight, their bodies veering away. Father Lucero stood 10 paces from the porch, clutching his rosary. He whispered that he could hear whispers inside the walls, too faint to make sense of, just motion, a rhythm of syllables that didn't belong to any tongue he knew. Rosa Duarte said it sounded like recitation, like pages being turned too fast. They circled it again. The balcony was gone. In its place, a small attic window had opened, its shutters trembling though no wind moved. Behind the glass, something faint flickered. Not movement, not light, but a pulse like reflections caught on moving water. The carpenter's wife came that afternoon, demanding to see if Luis had returned. She shouted his name until her voice broke, her cries echoing against the trees. The sound changed as it reached the house, distorted, delayed, like a recording played backward. When she stopped, the echo didn't. Her name came back to her, syllable by syllable, as if repeated from within. She ran. That night, no one slept. The village dogs barked endlessly toward the clearing until their voices grew hoarse, then fell silent all at once, tails tucked, eyes fixed on nothing. The fog rolled in again, thick as wool, and sometime after midnight, a sound began. A faint, rhythmic knock, too steady to be human. Rosa counted the intervals. Every 7 seconds, exactly 1. She marked them in a notebook. By dawn, the count had reached 436 before it stopped. When the sun rose, the fog burned away quickly, and the house was closer. It stood nearly at the tree line now, its foundation cutting into roots that hadn't been disturbed before. A portion of the roof had split open, revealing a dark interior. Father Lucero insisted on entering. "If this is a test," he said, "then someone must answer it." He crossed himself and stepped forward. The others waited, holding their breath as he disappeared into the shadowed doorway. For a long moment, nothing. Then, a sound. The creak of a hinge, the slow slide of something heavy across wood. When he emerged, he was pale, shaking. "The inside," he said, voice breaking, "is wrong." He tried to explain, but his words made no sense. "There are stairs that lead nowhere. A door that opens to itself. The floor breathes under your feet, like it's remembering the weight." He looked back once toward the doorway and added, almost whispering, "And the windows look into yesterday." That afternoon, he locked himself in the church and refused to speak again. As evening came, thunder rolled through the hills, deep, low, drawn out. But the sky stayed clear. The villagers watched as the lightning came from the ground instead, crawling upward through the soil in threads of pale light that spread toward the house. Each time one reached it, the wood glowed from within, veins of gold running through its walls before fading. And then came the smell, pine, resin, and something sweeter, like burning fruit. From the forest's edge, Rosa saw movement in the upper window. A silhouette, human in shape, but still, too still, its head tilted as if listening. She counted 3 breaths before it stepped back and vanished into the dark. The air trembled once. Then all sound in the valley stopped. Even the crickets forgot their song. The 5th night began without wind. The air was thick enough to taste. Copper, damp, almost sweet. The moon hung low, red through haze, and the forest glowed faintly from within, as though it too had learned to breathe. No one in the village slept. They knew the rhythm now. 3 nights of silence, one of movement, one of return. At the edge of the clearing, the house pulsed with light. Not bright, not visible exactly. More the suggestion of light, as if the darkness around it had grown thinner. Each pulse came with a sound, wood flexing, slow and deliberate, as if the house were stretching after a long sleep. Rosa Duarte stood beside the mare, holding a lantern that barely stayed lit. The air moved differently there, heavy, resistant. It thickened around the flame, bending it toward the door. When she stepped closer, she saw her reflection ripple across the glass of the windows. For the first time, it smiled back. Inside, the house moved. You could feel it before hearing it. A vibration that began in the chest and spread outward, aligning heartbeat to rhythm. Every board, every nail seemed to hum in unison. Then, a single sound cut through the air. The creak of a hinge opening somewhere deep within, followed by the unmistakable echo of a footstep. The lantern dimmed. Rosa held her breath. The sound came again, closer, measured, calm. 1 step every 2 heartbeats. She wanted to run, but her body refused. Her pulse matched the rhythm of the steps until the 2 became indistinguishable. Then, silence. From the doorway came a faint breath, warm, humid, human. The darkness inside shifted, and the shape that emerged was not quite a figure, not quite a shadow. It stood at the threshold, tall, indistinct, its surface reflecting the lantern's weak light, as though covered in thin glass. Where its face should have been, there was only movement, the subtle undulation of a surface trying to remember its form. Rosa dropped the lantern. It hissed in the damp soil and went out. The glow inside the house brightened, filling the doorway with a color that wasn't a color, something between silver and pale amber, a vibration more than a light. Within it, the walls began to shift. The doorframe expanded outward, boards stretching, nails sliding free without a sound. The structure groaned once, a long, low exhale that made the air shake. Then came the noise. Not loud, but vast. A resonance that seemed to come from the ground, the trees, the air itself. It rose in frequency until every leaf trembled. The grass around the house bent in waves. The fog thickened into shape, outlines of furniture, stairs, faces, all flickering like reflections on water. The villagers who watched from afar said the house unfolded. They used that word later, unfolded, as if the walls had peeled back like pages turning, revealing layers of rooms inside rooms, doors within doors. The shape expanded, then contracted, not like a collapse, but like breathing. Rosa stepped backward, but the ground beneath her shifted. Her heel sank into soft soil that hadn't been there a second earlier. The clearing rippled, earth moving like liquid under tension. When she looked up again, the figure in the doorway was gone. In its place stood something else. The house, but smaller now. Different again. The porch was missing. The windows were wider. The door hung open, revealing an interior that didn't match its size. Vast, cavernous, glowing faintly as if lit from below. Then the sound stopped. And everything, the fog, the tremor, the light, froze. For a long, fragile moment, nothing moved. Even time seemed to hold its breath. Then the light withdrew into the house, folding back into its walls until only darkness remained. When dawn came, the house was silent. The air smelled of sap and ashes. Rosa's footprints ended at the threshold, but she was gone. The villagers found only her notebook lying in the mud, pages soaked but intact. The last words she had written were still visible through the stains. It doesn't build itself. It borrows shape from whoever watches. The morning after Rosa disappeared, the air in Itacurubi felt wrong. It had weight, like a room sealed too long without breath. Every sound came delayed, echoing faintly even in open space. Conversations died in throats, replaced by glances toward the forest where the clearing lay. The house still stood there, smaller now, almost modest. A single floor, plain walls, the kind of house no one would look at twice. But its quietness was deceptive. The birds that crossed its shadow fell silent mid-flight, wings beating slower as if the air thickened around them. The grass around its foundation leaned inward, bent by no visible wind. Father Lucero finally broke his silence. He gathered 12 men from the village and led them toward the clearing at dawn, carrying torches and holy water. The mist clung low to their knees. It didn't scatter when they walked through it. It moved with them, following their steps like breath on glass. When they reached the house, everything was still. The door hung open again, though no wind moved it. The interior was dark, but not empty. They saw movement, faint, irregular, like light passing through water. One man swore he saw the shape of Rosa standing near the back wall, her outline blurred, her hand raised as if in greeting. But when he called her name, the shape dissolved. They entered anyway. Inside, the air was colder. Their torches dimmed, their flames thinning until they barely glowed. The floor felt soft, uneven, as though floating on water. With each step, something deep beneath them responded. A slow pulse, steady, enormous. The walls exhaled moisture, condensation forming beads that rolled upward instead of down. Father Lucero whispered a prayer, though his voice barely carried. "If this place remembers us," he said, "we must remind it of what we are." He began to sprinkle holy water on the walls. The droplets hissed. Where they touched, the wood darkened, then faded again, as if the surface absorbed not the water, but the memory of it. The others followed his lead. Each movement echoed twice, once in their ears, once behind them. When one of the men turned to look, he froze. His torchlight revealed a second row of figures standing in the same formation, mirroring their every gesture, but half a breath late. Their faces were wrong, flattened, luminous, transparent like oil over water. The men panicked. One dropped his torch and the flame rolled across the floor but didn't die. It split into two, then three, crawling across the planks as though searching for something to ignite. The air thickened again, pressing against their lungs. Then, a sound, faint at first, like wood under strain. It grew until the whole structure seemed to groan. The walls began to shift inward, boards bending, edges melting into one another like wax. The room stretched. The ceiling rose. Doors appeared where there had been none, opening into darkness that led nowhere. The men ran. Some made it out. Others didn't. Those who escaped swore the house expanded behind them, swallowing distance, its doorway growing wider the farther they ran. They didn't stop until they reached the church, where they collapsed in the dust, coughing water. Father Lucero was the last to emerge. His robe was soaked, his hands trembling. He said nothing for a long time, just stared toward the tree line where the fog had begun to glow again. When he finally spoke, His voice was calm. "It isn't haunted," he said. "It's remembering. It remembers every step, every voice, every person who enters. It folds them into itself so it won't forget again." That night, the house pulsed once more. The villagers felt it through the earth, a slow vibration that traveled up through their floors, through their beds, into their chests. Some said it felt like a heartbeat. Others said it felt like breathing. By morning, the house had changed again. It was now 2 stories high. Smoke rose from the chimney, though no one had entered since dawn. The balcony had returned, its railing polished, the same as it had been before Rosa vanished. And from the second-floor window, a shadow moved. Slow, steady, human. The carpenter's wife fainted when she saw it. It looked exactly like Luis. But when the villagers went closer, the shadow didn't hide. It stepped to the window, tilted its head, and smiled. The same delayed smile Rosa had seen in the reflection days before. Then, as they watched, the light inside shifted. The window filled with fog from within, and when it cleared, there was no one there. Only the faint reflection of the crowd below. All of them standing, staring upward, unaware that their reflections were smiling back. The house no longer waited for night to change. It began to shift beneath the daylight, slow enough that you could doubt your eyes, but constant enough to unsettle the stomach. The roofline breathed, rising and sinking by inches. The wood at the corners swelled, veins of moisture threading through it like blood beneath skin. The chimney grew taller by degrees, stone stacking itself silently, as if the structure had remembered a former shape. At first, the villagers tried not to look. They walked faster when passing the clearing, heads bowed, eyes fixed on the road. But vision is disobedient. It wanders even when we forbid it. Soon, the house was reflected everywhere, in buckets of water, in window glass, in the sheen of tin roofs. Some said they saw its image ripple across the surface of their tea before it cooled. 3 days after the last change, the church bell cracked mid-morning, splitting down the center with a sound that startled birds into flight. The air trembled after it, carrying a low hum that echoed through the valley. Father Lucero dropped to his knees in the square. "It's the same frequency," he whispered, his eyes unfocused. The same breath. No one answered him. By noon, the smell had returned. Pine, oil, and something sharper, almost like citrus. It drifted through the entire village, clinging to clothes, settling in hair. It didn't dissipate. The schoolteacher said it reminded her of varnish, of something being sealed. The others thought it smelled like new wood. The next morning, the first disappearance occurred. A boy named Esteban went to fetch water from the well before sunrise. His mother heard him humming as he left. She found the bucket still swinging by the rope 20 minutes later, the water inside untouched. Around the well, the earth was damp with footprints, not leading away, but circling, looping until they faded into each other. Then came another, an old man, then a woman from the mill. Each gone between breaths, each last seen near something reflective. The well, the windows, the puddles after rain. It was Rosa's handwriting that returned first. On the 5th day, the mayor found a page from her notebook pressed against the church door. The ink had bled, but her handwriting was clear, deliberate, steady. Every wall has a reflection. Every reflection has a memory. The house only shows us what it borrowed. That night, the fog crept into the village itself. It didn't drift like before. It spread low, hugging the ground, curling around ankles and door frames. Inside every home, the furniture shifted slightly. Chairs turned toward windows. Cups rattled faintly in cabinets. The dogs didn't bark. They just whimpered, staring at the corners where walls met. Father Lucero gathered those who would listen and led them back toward the clearing. "It has learned from us," he said. "It wants to become what it remembers." The clearing was no longer empty. The house had multiplied. 3 of them now, identical in size and color, standing side by side like reflections made solid. The middle one leaned slightly forward, as if listening. Between them, the ground shimmered with a sheen of water, though the rain had not fallen. The priest approached with his cross held high. The others stayed behind, whispering prayers. The air inside the clearing was cold, metallic, charged. When the wind shifted, they could hear breathing again. 3 separate rhythms, overlapping, not quite synchronized. He stepped between the houses, murmuring Latin, and felt his breath shorten. His shadow stretched outward and split into 3 directions, one falling toward each doorway. He froze. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement, not from within the houses, but from the reflections forming on their walls. His own reflection blinked. The villagers saw him stumble. He dropped the cross, reaching toward something none of them could see. Then he was gone, not swallowed, not taken, simply gone. His shadow lingered a moment longer on the grass before dissolving into the fog. When the crowd fled back to the village, they brought the smell with them, stronger now, sweet and heavy, like sap warmed by sunlight. It filled every room, every lung, until even those who hadn't gone near the clearing tasted it on their tongues. That night, the houses in the village began to creak. Their walls expanded and contracted softly, like lungs in sleep. Floorboards bowed under invisible weight. In the silence between the sounds, a new rhythm took root. Faint, steady, familiar. The heartbeat of wood. When morning came, every door in the village faced the wrong direction. By the end of that week, the villagers stopped speaking of the house as something separate. It was no longer there, beyond the trees. It was here, among them, beneath them, inside them. The distinction between the clearing and the village had blurred like ink bleeding across damp paper. Every structure now carried a trace of it, the same scent of resin, the same faint hum deep within the walls. Some claimed they could hear footsteps moving between rooms when no one else was home. Others said they woke to find new door frames where none had been before. The carpenter's wife swore her kitchen had grown wider overnight. The window above her sink reflected not her own home, but another, nearly identical, where her reflection moved a moment behind. When she blinked, it did not. And the church, it had begun to change too. The altar darkened, the wood slick with condensation. The pews rearranged themselves slowly each night, angling toward the door instead of the cross. When the congregation gathered to pray, their voices carried strange echoes, soft and delayed, as if someone beneath the floor were whispering along. At dusk, the bell tower leaned. The cracked bell that had once marked the hours now swung on its own, slow and uneven, the clapper moving without sound. The villagers watched it through the window panes, holding their breath as though afraid to interfere. The air itself seemed to listen. On the 12th night, Itakurubi held its last town meeting. No one sat. They stood in a circle in the plaza, lamps burning low. The fog surrounded them, silent and waiting. The mayor's hands shook as he spoke. "It isn't just the house," he said. "It's the idea of a house. It's learned our measure. It builds itself from memory. And now, it's building us back." No one answered. A sound drifted through the square. Faint, rhythmic, unmistakable. Hammer on wood. One strike every 7 seconds. The carpenter's wife screamed. They ran to her home, but it wasn't hers anymore. The walls had changed color. The roof was new, the beams straight. A small upstairs window had appeared, light flickering behind it. When the priest's assistant forced the door open, there was no one inside, just the smell of pine and candle wax, and the sound of slow, steady breathing. They left the door open when they fled. By dawn, her house had vanished. In its place, the soil was smooth and dry, shaped into a perfect rectangle. The others tried to leave the valley, but the road was gone. Where it should have led north toward the highway, there was now forest, thick and endless, the trees leaning inward like a wall. When they tried to retrace their steps, they found themselves back in the square. The village had folded. From the ridge, if you looked down at Itakurubi, it no longer looked like a collection of houses but a pattern. Concentric circles of roofs and streets, aligned like the grain of wood. At the center, where the square had been, something pulsed faintly beneath the fog. That night, the air grew hot. Doors swelled shut. The sound of wood under strain echoed through every room. The walls glistened as if sweating. From somewhere deep within the earth came a low resonance, a hum so deep it blurred thought. One by one, the lamps went out. The village breathed in. When the morning light finally returned, Itakurubi was silent. No one walked the streets. No smoke rose from chimneys. The air shimmered above rooftops, bending light into strange angles. And when the sun reached the center of the plaza, the fog cleared just enough to reveal something standing there. A house. Perfect. Ordinary. New. Its paint was still drying. Its windows reflected the empty village. And in one of those windows, a curtain shifted, just slightly, as if moved by breath. The villagers never came back, but travelers passing through years later told the same story, that if you slept near the old road at night, you'd hear the faint sound of hammering, patient, deliberate, endless, and wake to find your tent facing a different direction. Sometimes, they said, you'd find a doorway standing in the grass where no building had ever stood. And if you dared to look through it, you'd see a room that wasn't yours, where everything, the light, the furniture, the shadows, was a heartbeat too late. Years passed before anyone wrote Itakurubi's name again. Maps were redrawn, trade routes diverted, and the valley was left to fog and memory. The government claimed the soil had collapsed after heavy rain, swallowing the village whole. But the mountains nearby had been dry for months that year. The officials didn't stay long. Their compasses spun, and their photographs came back overexposed, as if light itself refused to hold the image. Those who lived nearby knew better. They said Itakurubi had folded inward, not destroyed, not erased, just inverted. Its houses, its people, its prayers all drawn into one continuous inhalation that never found release. The forest grew over the roads, roots pushing through cobblestones like veins through skin. But at night, from the ridges above, a faint pattern of lights could still be seen beneath the mist. Pale, flickering, geometric, as if the village were still there, continuing its slow rearrangement underground. The few who wandered too close spoke of strange things. A hum in the soil that matched their own pulse. Doors standing alone in clearings. Shadows that leaned the wrong way. And sometimes, a smell. Sharp, sweet, unmistakable. Like wood freshly cut, resin warming under sunlight. One traveler, a geologist from Asuncion, stayed long enough to draw a map. He noted that the shape of the valley had changed subtly over time, the ridges curving inward, their slopes unnaturally smooth. In his report, he wrote, "The terrain exhibits signs of architectural geometry, as if shaped by intention rather than erosion." He didn't return for his second expedition. Locals say the forest moves differently there. Its trees don't creak, they sigh. Its shadows aren't cast, they breathe. On windless nights, you can hear the sound of wood expanding and contracting, the same rhythm that once marked the heartbeat of the house. Some still call it La Casa que Cambiaba, the house that changed. But those who have seen it say it's no longer a house. It's a field of doors now, standing in perfect silence, facing different directions. The air between them hums faintly when the temperature drops, a tone so low it vibrates through bone. And if you listen long enough, the sound arranges itself into patterns, like footsteps on floorboards, like breathing against glass, like a voice learning to speak again. The villagers, they say, are still there, not gone, not dead, just remembered differently. The house built them back the way it understood them, not as people, but as rooms. Each life a space, each memory a wall. They became its structure, its rhythm, its perpetual motion. And when rain falls, slow, heavy, unending, the valley glows faintly beneath the surface, as if lit from below. Some call that a reflection. Others call it a warning. Now, when the fog drifts low over that part of Paraguay, it moves differently, as though tracing the outline of something that isn't there anymore. The valley still exists on maps, but no one marks it with a name. The air feels heavy in that place, like it's filled with unfinished sentences. Birds skirt wide circles around it, their wings twitching mid-flight, uncertain whether the wind will hold. Travelers who lose their way sometimes stumble upon it. A flat plain where no trees grow, covered in short, colorless grass that bends inward, always inward, toward a center no one can see. If you walk too far into it, you'll hear the sound first. Wood shifting under weight, nails sighing, doors adjusting in their frames. The wind doesn't make that sound. The earth does. The stories say that if you stand perfectly still, the world around you rearranges in silence. The horizon tilts a fraction. The air folds once, twice, like paper being creased. And when you blink, there will be something new nearby. A wall, a step, the shadow of a window where sunlight shouldn't reach. At night, the transformation becomes clearer. The mist brightens from within, pale gold pulsing through it, as if the fog itself were exhaling light. Shapes appear, straight lines, edges, corners, forming slowly, as if the valley were remembering the idea of rooms. It never finishes building. The walls grow halfway, dissolve, and grow again, restless and precise. Those who have seen it say it looks like a memory rehearsing itself. One traveler described finding a door standing alone in the grass. Perfectly crafted, freshly painted, the hinges gleaming though no hand had touched them. When he stepped closer, he felt the air change temperature, warmer, closer, rhythmic. He placed his hand on the wood, and it gave under his touch, soft, like breath trapped in fabric. Behind it, something exhaled. He ran. Later, when he told the story in Asuncion, he wept without knowing why. His handprint remained on that door for years, pressed deep into the grain like the memory of warmth. They say the house still moves at night, not as a structure now, but as an idea. It travels through reflection, through anything that remembers a straight line, glass, water, even the sheen of an eye. It borrows shape from what looks at it. Each time someone glances too long, a little more of that gaze stays behind. Another angle, another corner, another faint outline of belonging. That's why the locals no longer build with wood. They use stone now, heavy and silent, resistant to memory. But even stone remembers, especially when it's quiet long enough. And sometimes, when rain falls in that valley, soft and endless, the kind that blurs time, the drops don't hit the ground. They vanish midair, as though slipping into another version of the same place. If you listen closely then, beneath the sound of water and earth, you can hear it again, not loud, not insistent, just the slow, steady rhythm of a house breathing in its sleep. It never stops. It only changes shape. And somewhere, deep under that soil, the wood is still warm.